4-minute statement. So Neil Palmer, would you start us off with your introductory statement?
Thank you very much, Sarah. I want to thank the Junior Guild for agreeing to host this forum so that we had the opportunity for people to hear both from Mary and I on this office, but also then for the trustee candidates. You know, ever since we lost local newspapers and so on, it's very hard for people to get information in today's world in a small community. I've had the honor to serve on the village board for a number of years as trustee and village president, and I consider that service very, very important as to the way I conduct my life, and that it is part of, I think, why all the people I've encountered through the years that have been on the village board or the committees, we're one of the few communities in the whole state that have citizens on our committees, is because we all really want the same thing. We want a safe, family-friendly community that's got good services, you know, good police, good fire, EMS, good DPW, and reasonable taxes and stable taxes. What a lot of people don't know much about what we do, because in most of our business goes on week to week, month to month, and is not much of a controversy in any way, but it does go on. We're a unique kind of little business. In the village president office, what's different for the president than just being a trustee is the president has the responsibility to represent the village at regional and state government, very little federal. It also has, by our charter, it is the chair of the plan commission. And then I make nominations to all the committees, which the board has to vote on. And then really the meat of the work is the president's job, sitting typically in the middle of this dais many times a month, is to guide the conversation going on in a village board meeting or in a committee meeting or a plan commission or a building board or whatever. I've worked very hard through my years as president, and I think even before, to increase the ability and the opportunity for members of the public to not only know what's going on, we're increasing our digital resources and so on, but also have the opportunity to be involved in meetings. Anyone who had ever traveled to other communities or been involved in government would know that we don't follow strict Robert's Rules of Orders here. We let people talk as long as you're respectful and so on. Far more than happens in any other community. I happen to believe that's very, very important to let people speak, and I pledge to. I want to keep it that way. And all the board members at the current board support that kind of policy. That we need to talk with our citizens. It's not always easy. People tend to be passionate about issues, so they can get excited. But you know, the aspects of local government that we'll get into later in questions, I'm sure, are quite unique, require, I believe, importantly, experience and knowledge that I've gained through the years in doing this. I would like to be able to do it for one more term. We have some very big challenges in front of us, and I'm looking and asking for the residents' support on the April 6th election. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, for that answer. Mary Inden, our other candidate, could you give us an introductory statement?
Thank you. Mary Inden, I live on Watertown Plank Road, and I'm married, have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. I've been in the village for a very, very long time. When we moved here, our children were quite little, and we live across the street from the pathway on Watertown Plank Road. So I've been spoiled all this time to have the ability to have my kids go to the village and for me to get some exercise. I always figured a walk down the pathway to the village was worth a donut at the grocery store. But the kids enjoyed the village so much, and I had a very busy husband, so I filled in as soccer coach, Cub Scout den leader, assistant at the schools, and so on. And then got invited to be part of the committee for the 4th of July. There was a woman here who ran it for a couple of years and she needed help. So I thought, this is very cool. and just got stuck and just absolutely loved the 4th of July and was chairperson or co-chairperson for 35 years. Opened a business, an internationally awarded art gallery that was here in the village until the housing crash, and had to close in 2011. So I do have quite a bit of retail experience and what happens when there are negative activities going on in the village. When you tear up a road, I can tell you, we're going to lose businesses. The businesses will lose money and employees. I do consulting work now, and that's very interesting, but it does give me more free time, and that's what I'm looking at to become president of the village and contribute more of my service hours, as Neil points out, that I just love this village. To me, it's like the old Pollyanna movie that you all are too young to even remember, but it's lovely, lovely people living here and neighbors who are interested in what you're doing and your safety and so on. But there are things that I would like to see change. I would like to see more businesses in Elm Grove. I think the ones we have are very high quality, but as the economy changes, we all know now with COVID, up and down Blue Mountain, businesses are closing. We're going to be lucky to keep the ones we have and then try and get more. So I think communicating to businesses that we would like you to move to the village, we'd like to have it be more busy. The School Sisters of Notre Dame is a big topic, and I feel that we do need to work with Mandel and the neighbors together to try to find the solution to what they want and what Mandel can do for us. Municipal water is another big issue that we need to continue to research and negotiate for. There'll be more questions, so I'll answer them as they come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Now we'll get into our submitted questions. As I mentioned at the top, these moderated questions topics will have a 3-minute initial response from each of you in turn, and then following that, if you would like to respond to the response, you can have up to 2 minutes to do that. Mary ended her statement about School Sisters of Notre Dame, and that's the most popular topic that had submitted questions. We will go right into that. The first question or topic is, as the development proposal currently stands, are you in favor? If not, what areas do you think need improvement? Elaborate on how you might work collaboratively with the developer, village leaders, and citizens to find a mutually agreeable pathway forward. So we're going to alternate, so we'll have Mary answer the question first.
Okay. There are 3 key words, design, density, and traffic. The density will affect traffic, of course. I'm concerned that it is still zoned in institutional, which means it could conceivably be a small hospital. Having been a nurse for years, knowing changes of shifts with doctors coming, nurses coming and going, we don't want to leave it as an institution zone, and we want to bring in the best that we can. I think there is a lot about the Mandel project that is a positive, and they seem to have listened to the neighbors somewhat. They've made some major changes. They went from a pocket neighborhood to a cul-de-sac. I had spoken to Mr. Phil Aiello, who was here at a meeting one night, and I said, nobody knows what a pocket neighborhood is. Why don't you do a cul-de-sac? I think it's a lot of, there's opinions way over here, and there are opinions way over here, and what can we do to mesh and make it acceptable? A big concern is apartments versus condos, and I have not been privy to those meetings. I don't know what's going on, but if elected, I would continue to negotiate with Mandel to try to get the best that we can. The third building in the back that's curved, I feel does not fit in with the neighborhood for architectural details and so on. I just got back from Seattle, and it looks like a Seattle complex. Boxy. It doesn't really fit as the ordinances says it should. It doesn't really fit in with the neighborhood and the community. So I would like to continue to negotiate a different look and possibly lower density, maybe a mixed condo with some apartments, to see what we could come up with that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Neil.
I mean, the School Sisters Project obviously is one that is the number one subject in the village. It's been going on for going on a year now to help people understand. The School Sisters, who've been here for 170 plus years, are leaving this July. The buildings will be empty when they vacate and move to their new living quarters. They went through a multi-year process to decide what they wanted to do with the campus. They have 3 other campuses in America that they're selling off because the order is shrinking. They selected a developer after a long, lengthy process they went through. Prior to that, our only input was, as a village, was to tell them, well, here's the rules we have. Make sure you pass that on to, and that when you select a developer, obviously we'll start talking to them. We have a very defined process in the village as to how any development is considered. When it was first announced, it was quite controversial. Actually, even before the Pocket neighborhood, there was a senior living facility. There were many side-by-side rental properties around the fringe. The plan has changed 4 times already based on the input they're getting both from the community, principally, and then from the village. They actually just filed their application with us in January. And we started our formal review at both the building board, where you deal with this architectural issues like Mary has mentioned, and at planning commission, where we deal with a lot of the issues of infrastructure and so on. Public Works will take it up. That is a process that everybody has access to, and we'll continue to do it. I don't know of anybody on the village board who's made any, quote, decision. It's our job to analyze and try to get the best project possible. And we'll get to that point and see if it's one that's acceptable by the vote that the village will take sometime. It's always hard to say, figure early summer.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, is there anything else you'd like to say in response?
No, I think that it's negotiating. It's, as I said, trying to get the 2 sides to get closer so that nobody's going to be happy all the time. And all the people aren't going to be happy all the time. So we have to try to carefully work together.
Neil, would you like to say anything more?
And I agree with Mary says, but I think it's important to point out, Mary said, I don't think anybody wants to see a new institutional use on that site. A hospital, a school, any kind of incarceration facility. Understand that they could sell it tomorrow to an institutional use and we would have very little control over what got built. I would also add, just to that point though, doing nothing is not an option. The School Sisters are leaving. You're going to have a very large property, much of which is decades old, and it's going to be empty. One thing about government is ultimately it'll all end up in our lap if something doesn't happen. Who's going to take care of the property? Who's going to take care of the buildings? This is a very complex issue that has lots of pieces to it, and that's what I would urge everyone to try to learn as much as you can about what the trade-offs are.
Thanks, Neil. We will move to our next question now. What do you view as an ideal population density at the School Sisters of Notre Dame site?
Well, there's a couple of ways to look at what's an ideal density. I'm not sure what I even know what that means so much as where the project sits now. It's proposed as 3 new buildings, and then 2 of the historic buildings renovated and rehabilitated for what would be, now is estimated to be a total rental units of somewhere between 200 and 240 when you count the ones in the 2 older buildings. And then there's 22 single-family home sites. There's no longer any rental side-by-sides on the border. There's no senior living. It's all single family on those 22 lots, which will be built by one of the premier single family home developers. I can tell you that that we're talking about projects there, that homes that will range from $900,000 to $1.5 million. That's the market today for 3,000 square foot houses. The density right now, literally would be the lowest density we have in any multifamily structure in the village. Because remember, this is a 30-acre site. So I'm not actually concerned that the real issue about density is what is the minimum density they can bear, meaning Mandel, and still be able to pay to demolish all the old buildings, rehab the two historical structures, and maintain them forever, because they're never going to pay for themselves. Even if you put 5 or 10 apartments in those two gigantic 170-year-old castle buildings, you're never going to do it economically. So really, the new apartments subsidize that. And it's important to realize that's, as best we know, that's a condition of the school sister sale for redevelopment. So what's the magic number? It's what the minimum number is for them to be able to have a successful project. They've made references in some of their meetings with neighbors that it's perhaps as low as 200 or as high as 245. That's not, by the way, that's not them being devious. It's until they get all the cost analysis of what it will take to demolish buildings and to renovate the old buildings. Those are big dollar items. The demolition's $1 million to $2 million. I have no clue what it would cost to renovate the two old buildings. I've been in them, and I can tell you it's going to be a lot. So that's why there's the variance. How much do you need? We'll find that out when they file later on some of their financial information, and that's how we'll make it. And so I would define the perfect density as one that pays for everything that needs to be done, and they can still have a project. If it can't pay for it, there'll be no project, and then we'll be back to the other two choices: an empty site or an institutional use.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, what would you say as your view on an ideal population density at the School Sisters site?
Again, I think the amount of units will make a difference. 1 or 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom units will determine how many people move in. In general, I have a lot of friends who are at or near retirement age, and they don't want to leave the village. They absolutely love it. They might have a 2-story or a tri-level, and my husband's somewhat disabled. He can't be going up and down stairs every day. We want to stay in a 1-story. We happen to have a ranch right now, and if we move to an apartment, it would be a nice size, very elegant apartment. So I think just picturing, I don't see families with 3 and 4 and 5 kids moving in. I picture couples, singles, people from the medical college, interns, residents, students coming there. And yes, they would move in and out every few years. But I think on average, if let's say that they do 200 units, 2 people a unit, that's 400 people, that would be 400 cars on average. The fact that they have changed the ingress and egress to 1 point on Watertown Plank is a real plus. It's not going, the traffic won't be going out into Red Barn or Stephen Place, which is what a lot of the neighbors were asking for. So I think this idea that we're going to be inundated with another 1,000 people or something, I don't think that's going to be what's going to happen. People with children, the concern about school, the school district understands that they have to accommodate however many children are here. I don't think we should turn down new residents to Elm Grove as a school thing. If we need another schoolroom, they just built a gym onto Tonawanda. If we need another pod, another section, the school district will have to build another section. It's how many kids you got. For a long time, when our kids were young, big families, then much smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, now we're getting more families with more than 2 kids. So I think the school district would have to accommodate whatever comes into this village. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Neil, would you like to comment on that?
A couple of quick things. One, traffic is an issue that everybody very rightly has had concerns about, as they do with any new development. The reality is that traffic from a multi-family structure is the lowest kind of traffic of anything that gets built anywhere. That's what the national engineering people would tell you, and the local and so on, because nobody comes and goes at the same time. We did part of our promise to the residents is once the application was filed, that we would hire our own traffic engineer to evaluate the report submitted by the applicant. That evaluation arrived this week. It's posted on the website like everything else is. You're free to read it. Short answer is that it finds that as the error study for Mandel did, it finds that the traffic is not in any way a significant issue. Even this study went on and included train counts and train delays and so on. Now, I know that's hard for people to just kind of quantitatively think. I just asked, I heard a great way to think about it from an engineer a couple of weeks back, and that is, think about your neighborhood. When you get up to go to work in the morning, assuming you do, remember there was a time when we all got up and left our houses. When you get up to go to work, and you get in your car and start driving to work, are all of your neighbors either right in front of you at the first stop sign or right behind you? The answer, of course, is no, because all it takes is for people in a neighborhood to be leaving at a few seconds difference, and it means you're not on the road at the same time. That's how you analyze traffic. But we have a very good new traffic study. I encourage everybody to read it. Schools, Mary, absolutely correct. That's an issue everybody had. Probably exacerbated by the fact that a few years back, we fought very hard to keep Town 1. The school board was going to close it. I, myself, and actually a couple of the current trustees were in that fight for months and months and months. The reality is right now, I can tell you that what we've asked, the village has asked the school board to do, is analyze the information of the expected number of children that could be in a residential development, both multifamily and single, and tell us what they think about it. I can tell you verbally, they have said they don't expect to have any problem whatsoever and no building as a result of it. You know, as Mary said, people with more than maybe their first child are typically not living in these kind of apartments. You have an apartment, you have your first child, you tend to want to get out and have a house. Not to mention, let's be realistic, the 3-bedroom apartment proposed for this project are over $3,000 a month. For most people, you could afford that's a pretty nice mortgage payment. So it's kind of the why would you do that? I will finally just point out, we're going to put together a little report to go with the school district's report that shows where all of the students are now, that age people that live in the village. I think what will astound most of you is to find out how many children live in the village who don't go to St. Mary's, any Elmbrook school, the Lutheran school, or Brookfield Academy. Almost 35% of the young people in the village don't go to any of those schools. So what makes you think, my point is, what makes you think 100% of any new students would go? So it doesn't appear to be the problem people thought it was.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, would you like to say anything in response to that?
No, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question, which is, what is your opinion on the appropriate mix of rentals versus condos or owner-occupied properties at the School Sisters of Notre Dame site? And let me see, Mary has the floor first.
Thank you. The appropriate mix, I don't know that. I'm not, my dad was a builder. I've worked with builders for my whole career in the art gallery and as a stager, but I don't have that kind of background. I can guess that, a portion of the development being something that you could purchase would be very appealing to some people. Apartment rental is what I've told you, my retired and near retirement friends have said would be kind of cool, that they could live there, not have to follow any rules except when they walk in their front door, not to get the mud on the carpet, So I think the demand, we could be doing some questioning of the neighbors and of the village. We could do a survey of the village just to get a feel for would people really like to live in that place and what would they want out of it. Would you want to buy or would you want to rent? And I think a survey could be a very inexpensive way of answering some of these questions.
Thanks, Mary. Neil, what do you think on the appropriate mix of rentals versus condos or
I
owner-occupied?
think the way to look at the mix is, first, recognize how much it has changed since the original proposal, where a great deal of the rental and the senior housing has gone away, and it's now significant amount of the total properties in single-family homes. And it really comes down to then saying, well, how much of the new buildings should be rental versus condominiums? And you have to start with the understanding, from Mandel's position, they're never going to build a condominium. We were blessed that they built one in Elm Grove. The Watermark, which for those of you who are new to the village, was a very, very controversial project. I find it quite warming that now people refer to it as, we want these new buildings to look as nice as that. But the point is, it's a business decision. Mandel does not build condominiums anymore. That was the only one they've ever built, and they don't want to do it again. It's not their business model. There are companies that build condominiums. There are many who will tell you in the finance side and the real estate investment that it's not, condominiums are not what the market wants. I can't answer that just like Mary. What's important is the proposal from Mandel does not include condominiums, and they have stated publicly, repeatedly, it will not. So that's not an option. It's high-end rental or nothing.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, do you have anything in response to that?
No, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. What are your thoughts on creating a TIF district for financing at the School Sisters site? Are you open to TIF districts for future projects in downtown Elm Grove? And Neil can answer first.
Thank you. Important to note that we have not been asked to provide TIF funding. TIF by Mandel. I do expect we will receive an application if the project continues to move forward. Tax incremental financing is a very misunderstood subject by people who haven't dealt with it. It is not only very common, we have 3 TIF districts in the village now. We provided TIF funding to help the Heritage Senior Living Facility get built. We had some TIF financing. We used TIF financing to fund our flood control project that rebuilt the entire park and the whole flood control system in the village. It's a way of using the value of a new construction to leverage a loan, in effect, is what it is. And then it's paid back by the value of that new development. Instead of the taxes going first to the village and then using that to pay the loan, they go straight to pay the loan. I can tell you that while we haven't seen what's eligible, it's very confined kind of things that are allowed. It's typically infrastructure is allowed to be used with TIF money. As a community, we have a long history of being very cheap, not only in our budgeting, but in TIFs. We don't give out TIFs like candy like a lot of communities do, and we never will, as any of us that I know that are on that board. What I would expect them to ask for a TIF for is to help build the water system that will come provide Milwaukee or Lake Michigan water through Wauwatosa to this site and allow us to expand it to the rest of the village. I expect them that another eligible expense is the demolition of the old buildings. That's TIFable. Other infrastructure can be, like roads and so on. But the things to remember are, A, they request it. We have the complete total authority to say yes or no. If we grant TIF money, it is not being paid for by the residents. It's being paid for by taxes that didn't even exist if the project wasn't built. Because this site has been tax exempt for its entire life, we've never gotten a nickel out of anything there to even pay for ambulance and fire and so on. Its anticipated costs for what's now being proposed to be built, the single family homes and the apartments as proposed, are going to be valued in excess of about around $100 million. We would expect at our current rate, we would get $1 million to $1.5 million of new taxes every year. If you assume they ask for a $5 million TIF, you could pay the TIF off in 5 years, and then we'd have the money going to the school system. Important, just final note. The school system and the county and the regional technical college and the village are all partners in a TIF, and that's who runs the quote TIF. But
Thanks, Neil. Mary, what are your thoughts on creating a TIF district for financing at School Sisters or in the village at large?
Yeah, I think it's a tool. I like tools. I know what a saw is, I know what a hammer is, I know what a screwdriver is. I like to use a tool, and as Neil said, the tax base would be so positive eventually to the village. We all want more pathways. We want a beautification of downtown. We want more activities in the park. We need to upgrade the pool eventually will be needing work, and the pool house does need some work. That money's got to come from somewhere. And we can raise our taxes a very small amount by a law that the state has on the books. And that law I just do not understand. George Haas, who's on the board and is head of the finance committee, wrote quite a long article in the last newspaper about the state and how we can raise our taxes based on new development, new construction in the village. And this year it was a raise of 1.69%. I think, what was that, 125,000 or so?
$121,000.
I mean, how can you wish for more pathways that can cost $300,000 to $400,000 or $500,000 to go from Highland to wherever without money? It's got to come from somewhere. And I think that I don't look at Mandel Development as a piggy bank. I look at it as the TIF being a tool that we can use to help the village and the School Sisters.
Thanks, Mary. Neil, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Just an additional point is that absolutely nobody that on the board that I'm aware of is looking at any new development, whether it's the Mandel or new houses or any other commercial redevelopment, as a piggy bank. The reality is we have costs as a village. We're a business in effect. What's different is we are severely restricted, and I hope we have some actual questions about budget, on how and where we can get money and how we can spend it as a village. As Mary alluded, one of the constraints on our community limited us this year to a 1.69 increase in our levy. That's the levy on property value, which came out to $121,000 on a $7 million budget. Did anybody's expenses at home or in your business go up more than 1.69% last year? Like health insurance, for instance, we have insurance for employees. And, my point is, we have been getting less and less money every year for virtually every year I've been on the village board, but our expenses have not gone down. They've gone up, even though we are famously cheap in what we'll spend money on. We are reaching a point where we have a very significant problem, with or without Mandel.
Thanks, Mary. Is there anything else?
Just a comment that a lot of our properties in the village were so well built years ago. People are buying them and renovating. We do have people who are buying houses and tearing them down, but that's not enough to do some of the things that people have on their wish list here.
Thanks. Another fiscal responsibility question. This is, last fall, a petition was circulated in the village to hold a referendum requiring village residents to approve public works projects of $1 million or more. Noting that the village board approved an ordinance requiring public referendum on projects of $5 million or more, what are your thoughts or positions on this? And Mary, you can answer first.
Okay. I was not involved with that before the petition. I found out about it quite late in the process of people getting signatures. Having been on the board for 10 years, a few years ago, more than a few, I understand that having $1 million limit before you would have to have a referendum is a really low bar. Or a high bar, I should say. It's too constrictive. To have a referendum is a horrific job to do, and it takes time, it takes money. Some of the issues that would cost more than $1 million could be an emergency. We had a flood here in 1998 I had 6 feet of water in my art gallery. It takes an emergency or some sort of problem with one of the fire trucks, or someone had an accident or whatever. It was too restrictive to ask for $1 million, and I understand that some of the people that signed it thought that that would stop the development of the school sisters, and I knew it wouldn't stop the development, and I just feel that the board was, unfortunately, it was, I think, not well explained to the people before all the signatures were obtained, that $1 million was a little low. It just was not going to be able to fly. We need a little more flexibility in covering some of the bigger expenses that could come up at any time, really. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Neil?
When the petition was presented, I guess I view it. I'm opposed to that kind of attempt to change very fundamentally how local government works. We have a republic. Our form of government says you elect people to make decisions for you. We are not a pure democracy where on every decision you have to ask everybody to hold their hand up. Mary makes points that are very, very, very positive about why it's a problem. You mentioned pathways that we all know everybody wants more of. None of the pathways on our current list of priorities is less than $1 million. That's today's prices. I can tell you human nature might say that a new pathway over in this part of the village, that a whole lot of the village might say, well, why would I vote to raise my taxes for that? I'm not even ever going to be there. You have that kind of issue. You have the issue of when you're a community and you're trying to plan things and you have to do public contracting and so on, which is very different than private business. A year out, you could end up proposing a project, then you have to schedule a referendum, and then you have an election. The entire process, to the best of my knowledge, has never worked well anywhere in the state. I considered it absolutely nothing more than an attempt to block the school systems project. And I think it's completely inappropriate. We had reports from many people who did actually sign it, and then when they found out what it was really about, they called the village and demanded their names be removed before the petitions were certified. The village was forced to pass an ordinance, in effect setting a limit, simply so that we wouldn't be so hamstrung that we couldn't even operate. So I completely oppose the whole concept of it, and in this case specifically.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I hope that these explanations will assuage some of the anger and angst that was generated by the decision to not limit it at $1 million. I think hopefully the citizens who signed it will understand that it just was not going to be a good idea.
Thanks.
I'll point out for just a quick addition, even though we then went on and passed an ordinance that set a higher realistic number if you had to have one at all, parties to circulation of that are still, we are in court with them. They're suing the village. They're suing you and me to try and enforce what they tried to do. So we as the community are spending money to fight our own residents, or they're forcing us to spend that money to try to win it that way. So you understand, that's still going on.
Thanks. I think this dovetails, it kind of goes back to the casting of leadership, of vision, if you will. But as a leader, what will you do to continually communicate and educate residents on issues of note to Elm Grove? It was mentioned by one of you that was maybe one of the unfortunate things with this public referendum thing, is that maybe it wasn't communicated quite adequately to the public just how much money is needed for your run-of-the-mill public works project. So how do you see yourself continually communicating and improving the way that residents can learn about these kind of things? And it's Neil first this time.
Well, I'll start with you. All of the village financial information, for instance, and everything about what the board knows has always been completely available to the public. Even before the times of streaming, we used to be on cable. We had our own TV channel here in the village. Every meeting was available, and I can tell you, people watch it. As Mary knows, you'd get a call after a meeting. Somebody said, I got home from work at midnight, and I was, because it used to play on a loop. And I watched you guys. What was that all about? But between that change and the change with newspapers, where it's much harder for people to get information now. And so it does take a little more effort. All of our meetings are streamed. We can't own a newspaper, but we work closely with our local monthly, which we are blessed to have. She gives as much information as she can. One of the things we're talking about doing in this coming year is efforts like this, where we can have more opportunity for streaming and feedback. Obviously the pandemic has emphasized how hard it is. It used to be people could come to every meeting and listen, and there was frankly never a reason for you not to know the answer to a question. It would only be because you didn't ask it. Because as I said, in meetings we take questions, and we do talk to people. And anybody should know, if you have a question about anything the village is doing, you walk down that hall anywhere between 8 and 4:30 and find one of the staff, and they will tell you the answer. There are no records that are secret except personnel records. The whole allegation we did have from some people about secret meetings and secret, that is so far from the truth in our village, it's almost be laughable. But I would be interested, just to finish the thought, in any ideas on how to improve communication, recognizing that we don't have a communication staff. For our population and our work, we have the smallest municipal staff that I'm aware of out of 470 some odd villages or cities in the state. So to say to somebody, well, why don't you write a weekly newsletter? That's the 18th job that somebody has to do that week. So that's kind of difficult. Doesn't mean we can't find a way to work with it or work with people to volunteer to help do it. We are going to definitely upgrade our technological ability to do it. One thing that we have right now, it's recent in the last couple of weeks, this meeting, just like all the recent meetings on Mendel, afterwards are stored in the cloud so that people didn't have to watch it tonight. You can watch it in the coming weeks. And we haven't made a hard decision yet, but it'll be a cost-driven. How long we'll keep those digital records available? Probably at least a year would be my guess. But the point is, we're open to how is it that people want to be communicated with that we can help with, that we can actually do.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, as a leader, what would you do to continually communicate and educate residents on issues in Elm Grove?
I find it very difficult at times to find my way around the website, and I go there relatively often. I'm not a geek. My son is, but I'm not. But I think if I would like to work with our tech person to simplify some of it and to make it a little more self-explanatory. I think also it would be a good thing because we used to have, if you haven't been here when we had a weekly newspaper that came out with all the sports and things from schools and the local news and so on. I would like to institute a page on the website that would be a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter that we could include some of the meetings and things that would make it more easy to find. Right now you can sign up difficultly to get notice of meetings of different committees, but you might not know which committee you really want to hear from. And I think seeing a link on a news note, let's call it, I like the term news notes, that you could go there and say, I'd like to find out if I can add a deck to my house. And, you could go there and perhaps we could get the question search for type thing that would be easier to use. If you're going to change your house, you need to talk to the zoning man and the building board, and that at least would give you the name and a phone number or whatever to contact that person. My storm sewer is backing up, what do I do? Things like that. Yes, you can call the village hall, but sometimes that's not as easy as it seems either, because we're closed at 4:30. We're open at 8. So I think a news notes page on the website would be fantastic. I would like to have more people come to the meetings. There are many, many, many meetings over the last number of years where it's myself and maybe one or two other people watching from the audience. It's the one time you really get to talk to the board and have a discussion. There's an early part of the meeting. It's called Hearing of the Public. And you can talk about any topic you want to mention. And if you're having problems, if you're happy with something, you want more stuff, you want bigger fireworks on the 4th, things that you want to communicate to people and you don't really want to be on the phone with them, or you're not going to email them, at least you could see how our government works. You can see how the board works. We're all your neighbors. The village is 2 miles by 2 miles. We're all neighbors, and it's very interesting, I find, to come to the meetings and see the interactions. At the end of the month, or the beginning of the month, the Independent Times newspaper comes out. But again, it's once a month, and there are a lot of things that go on in between that could be of interest to people. Thank you.
Thanks. Was there anything else you'd like to say,
Yeah,
Neil?
I mean, as I said, it is a continuing challenge, partly because the differences in how people want to receive information. Some people are very comfortable in a totally digital world. Some people aren't comfortable there at all. And we're trying to find that mix. All of the things that Mary mentioned that could be more easily found are actually all there. But I'd be completely in agreement with her. Sometimes it is not as intuitive as at least my brain works. So yeah, it can always be improved. She makes the suggestion of a kind of news note or a newsletter. It's exactly what I said. I mean, we need somebody to work to that. If people say they think that will help them, as opposed to going and looking at individual meeting minutes or whatever. But like Mary, I would also say, come to board meetings, or at the very least, sit on your couch with your laptop open or your computer and watch it. We now have the ability, you can actually ask questions that way. Beforehand, you have to sign up, but we're going to look at how we might open that up on a continuing basis. But it's there, you have to take some steps, and then it'll be better for all of us. We're actually less than 4 square miles. We're about 3.5 square miles. So everybody's a neighbor, but you got to take a little effort and we all know, we all have lives, you have families, you have jobs, and it's easy to get diverted to it, and then when you hear about something, you don't have all the background. But it's really not too hard to keep up, even though we don't have a paper anymore and we don't have the cable TV.
Thanks. Anything else you'd like to say on that topic, Mary?
I think the difficulty of finding your way around the website is maybe we need summer classes or something to teach. Tonight, before I came, my kids wanted to watch this. I took a snapshot and I texted it to them, and here's the elmgrovewi.org, and then go to this screen and hit this button. It's tough, so let's make it better.
You realize that all our children are laughing with us.
I know.
But the point is, it can always be made easier, and we're open to any suggestions about how to do it. And within financial means, we'll do what we can.
Thank you. We appreciate your answers on that. Let's go back to downtown master planning. So we talked a lot about the school sisters, but before the school sisters, there was the downtown master plan. The question is, what are your thoughts regarding the vision or concept for the downtown master plan as it stands, noting that the pandemic curtailed public discussion and approval meetings? So let's see, it'd be Mary first.
I'm disappointed in the downtown master plan. If you look at the aerial diagrams, it shows that Sendix is torn down, the 890 building is torn down, the Park and Shop is torn down. There's a new Sendix or some sort of community grocery store kind of in between where the 890 building and the Sendix is now. All new buildings along Elm Grove Road, which means the bank, Wooler Anter, the middle 910 building and so on are gone and replaced by stuff. It's just grandiose. Years ago, I talked to the big developer out in Delafield, Bob Lang, and I asked him about would he come to Elm Grove and take a look and see if he wouldn't like to come in and redevelop part of the downtown. And his comment, I think he's a brilliant guy, comment was that there are too many individual property owners. When he was working in Delafield, he could get the properties and combine them and so on. But here we have bigger properties and they're individually owned. And then along Watertown Plank Road, there are smaller property owners who are in love with their buildings. So I think what I've seen, the one thing that I do like about it is what Reinders had proposed. It's pretty much a copy of what Reinders' development was going to be, which I thought was in general a really good idea. I thought their development idea was very good. It also needed tweaking, and they were tweaking, but eventually they pulled out of it. So it costs money to do master plans. I think if you want to rezone properties. When people come and ask for it, like the Mandel Group has asked for rezoning, I don't see the master plan being practical. It's just not distinct enough, I'll call it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Neil, what are your thoughts on the downtown master plan?
Well, I think first to understand the downtown master plan, there's a great deal of misunderstanding or confusion about what it is. All the issues Mary raises and hundreds more have occurred through the years about how do you improve the downtown. People talk about we want it more walkable, you want more of this kind of business versus that kind of business. We do suffer as an area, if you were to put on just your developer hat, that what we have is too many landowners of small parcels, none of which by themselves can do much, but all of which the owners, if you're the owner, you happen to think it's worth a great deal of money, far more than somebody who would buy it and redevelop it might. We are also greatly challenged by the fact that under law, virtually nothing in our village can redevelop without water being brought to the village, because any new building under state law that's a commercial building or health facilities, but commercial building has to have sprinklers if it's over 5,000 square feet. Or else you have to have very exotic large tanks and fire pumps and all kinds of, which makes it uneconomic to build anything. But and more importantly to get to then is the point, the master plan was simply an exercise because we constantly as a village had people, developers and landowners and the public saying, well, what could go there? What people misinterpreted is that any of the existing buildings necessarily get torn down. What the master plan simply illustrates is if you look at the existing zoning, not new zoning, but what the zoning is on every parcel that exists right now, here's what would conceivably be allowed, meaning by size. That helps an owner know, well, hey, my building, my land might be able to be worth X because of this, and that might prompt them to help make an investment to improve their buildings. It doesn't, the master plan, if approved, doesn't build anything, doesn't tear anything down. It's simply, if you talk to people in the urban planning business, or in the development business, they'll tell you that a community has to have a development plan simply to guide people as to what is even conceivably possible way before an application. That's all this was designed to do.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, was there anything else you'd like to comment?
Neil, what did it cost for the master plan?
I honestly don't even remember. You're right that none of them are ever cheap. Every one of our previous efforts, you'll recall you were on the board when we did the downtown architectural standards that ultimately the board didn't approve. Some of the very same people who now say we ought to have them in place. But we pay a fair amount of money for that. Our master plan, I can get it and I'll post it up. It was not cheap. It wasn't the biggest plan ever having to be done anywhere, so it's not mind-boggling. But it costs a lot of money. But it's a tool we have to have in order for anybody, existing owners or potential buyers of land, to know what is conceivably possible. That's its whole purpose.
Mary, did you have any other comments? Or
Conceivably or required?
No, conceivable.
Okay.
No, it reflects only what the current zoning would allow you to do on that given parcel.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we included in it all the public input about we would really like to see a design that included a lot more walkability and better parking and those kind of things. But that doesn't in effect change what a given building parcel could conceivably have under the existing zoning.
Mm-hmm.
It just included connectiveness for pathways and so on. No, it's only what's there now.
Mm-hmm.
any other words from you, Mary? Or is that
No, that's fine.
okay? Thanks.
Thank you.
I think we'll move on to the next one. What are your thoughts on the creation of the proposed Elm Grove Transportation Utility, noting that many of the village roads and bridges are in need of repair or total replacement? How do you envision financing for a transportation utility will take place? So, Neil, you can answer this first.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I didn't quite hear you.
Yeah.
This is a proposal that maybe a lot of residents aren't familiar with yet, but it gets to the heart of the things we've been talking about. The village of Elm Grove is very, very limited in economic resources. I know that seems hard to believe in a community that has obvious wealth and prosperity, but because of state laws, we are very limited in how we can collect money and how much we can collect. We have been unable to do adequate work in our roads for a number of years, simply because the price of road work, asphalt, labor, and so on has been rising. Our state road aids has been going down, so that we're literally at a point now where we have very inadequate, I would describe it as maintenance on our roads. Not that the guys who are doing it aren't doing a good job, they're doing very, very, very incredible job with very, very few resources. But one of the tools that's available all in the world that is communities have started to do, because we can't change the legislation about how limited we are in revenue, is essentially just to create a entity called a transportation utility that then is responsible strictly for the items that are defined in its charter, which in our case would be roads and pathways. And then you can charge a separate fee to landowners for it. I mean, and you want to smile or cry, one or the other when you hear it. I mean, it's still the same people paying for it, in the sense that if you had it coming through your taxes, it would be the same. It'll be on your bill, your tax bill right now. When you get your tax bill, you also have a solid waste fee and you have a stormwater fee. Those exist to pay for those services because we couldn't put it in our regular expenses and pay for it. We have it under study right now. I can tell you that the inclination from all the finance committee, our outside consultants, and all the board members is that we will probably do it because we don't have any other choice unless the state changes dramatically. And I do not expect that to happen. And roads are particularly an item where if you don't continue to have good maintenance, then you're forced, not just to do maintenance, you're going to rebuild them completely because you lose the base and so on. It's a very significant problem that we have. All communities in the state have it. For us, it's just worse because of our size.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, what are your thoughts on the transportation utility proposal?
If we can form it, I think it would be a good idea. The problem that I have, and I'm sure I'm very naive about it, but this idea that the state can regulate that we can't raise money. It just boggles the mind. Maybe Neil knows when, but I have no idea when the state passed the law that we can only raise our taxes 1.69%, or they could penalize revenue sharing or something. It absolutely boggles the mind. I would take it on myself personally to find out why. Why can't we change it back? We're an independent community. There are how many hundreds of independent communities in the state that really could use more work to be done. If you drive through Milwaukee and Tosa and stuff, and the roads there are worse than ours, you know. It just absolutely boggles the mind that the state has the power to do that to a small village or any other big city. So I would really take it upon myself for a while and see what we could do. I may, as I said, I may be naive about it, but I think we can show that we need more than 1.69% increase. With the convent, with the added tax dollars we would eventually get, that would be very, very helpful, and we wouldn't have to raise it. But right now, it's not being developed, and we have needs. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Neil, do you have anything else to say on that?
Well, maybe it's just helpful to give a quick tutorial for residents on how municipal finance works a little bit. And this is a very shortened version. We can spend lots of time on it personally, or you can talk with Monica at any time. Basically, it's important to remember, local government, we are a unit. We are created by state government. So that's why they can, in effect, do whatever they want within reason, because they write the rules on how we operate. And that's how our state constitution works. We, a number of years back, we go back way before anybody in this room was thinking of these issues, the local communities all had different tax systems. Some municipalities actually had income taxes way back in the early 1900s. But and you had different sales taxes, and there was a drive in the state and a Blue Ribbon Commission that I want to say it was probably 50 years ago now, basically came to a grand deal where the state agreed that local communities will have their only source of income will be their property tax. The state will keep income tax and sales tax and any special taxes, but the state would also agree to create a program called shared revenues, and that was to balance out, because obviously there are communities where by their size and their nature are much poorer than other communities. So you need to help them. And there's this very grand formula in the shared revenue account that provides each community money each year. There's also one, by the way, called road aids, that each year communities are supposed to get a percentage of the gasoline tax based on how many miles of road you have and what kind of roads they are, whether they're local roads or state highways and so on. The fundamental problem that we allude to or describe here, that Mary, is that for the last 20 years, the state has been cutting the state aids every year. We get less and less than we did the year before. And you ask why don't we do anything about it? I happen to, as village president, I'm a member of the League of Municipalities. That's the trade group of cities and villages. There's 470 plus in the state. Have been working on this issue for as long as I've been involved as village president. I'm part of the lobby team. Why don't they listen? Because you don't want too much of my cynicism to come out, because they don't have to. We are free, I'll point out, it's not that, we're free to raise money different ways. We could start borrowing money to pay our monthly regular expenses. We have a wonderful credit rating because of the way we run our shop. But that would be likened to all of us in our homes or our businesses using your credit card for your monthly expenses, for everything. No, don't pay for anything in cash. We have a history of trying to run solidly financial institution. If you start paying, the only thing we borrow for in our history is capital projects. That's big equipment, big things we build. You don't borrow money for expenses that are going to be there every day, salaries and so on and so forth. We are of the opinion we don't ever want to do that. So at least for now, on the road issue, which is a very glaring problem, we're going with the utility as a way to collect money to improve our roads. I can assure you that we'll continue to join other communities. I'm going to Madison in a couple of days to meet with members of the Joint Finance Committee for this session's efforts at getting them to change these formulas to be more realistic. We're lucky that our state senator, Senator Koyunga, is on the Joint Finance Committee, the most powerful committee there is, and he understands these issues. Regretfully, he's not the only one. There are other people in there, so it'll be politics. That's not a dirty word. That's just how things get worked out. And I'm actually hopeful we're going to see some progress this year in adjusting some of these formulas, because none of them can deny anymore when you show the graph and it just does this for 20 years. It doesn't take a accountant to figure out that's not going to work, because our expenses don't go down.
Thanks, Neil. Mary, do you have any other comments on the transportation utility?
No, thank you.
Okay. I have one more question, and then there'll be closing statements. So this is about the creek daylighting. Can you comment on the potential daylighting of Underwood Creek? I thought this was funny, so I'm leaving it in, AKA Under Sendix Creek in the parking shop. And what should the village's involvement be? So Mary, you can answer this first.
Okay. Having been a victim of the flood, I told you before, 6 feet of water in my art gallery. Luckily, my 2 children did not die in the flood. There were 2 children who died. And we did need to fix the problem. And the DNR allowed the change of the park and we got rid of the island and all that kind of stuff. And we had taken tours on buses to other communities to see what they were doing with management of the water, stormwater, and so on. And I appreciate greatly the amount of effort it took and the design to get to where we are now. And I understand that there's an agreement that with the DNR that we are supposed to open the creek. But when the talks first started, I was not on the board, but having been a victim of it, I was very interested in it. We were shown and told that you could do a 10-foot wide stone wall, 10-foot wide, and the creek would go back to naturalization. And then it got to be 25 feet wide, and well, let's open it up on one side and we could plant things. And then it got to be 35 feet wide. And at that point, I went to Martinizing with my tape measure and measured from the railroad right-of-way and their drive-through asphalt driveway over 35 feet. And it went over as far as the egress driveway to get out onto Watertown Plain from Sendix. Now it's up to something like 85 feet. And it's 900 feet long or thereabouts. And I think it is, again, I'll use the word grandiose and too expensive. And I think it's going to so dramatically change. Again, having been in retail for all those years, it's not going to help downtown. The residents have made comments that they would like walkability, bikeability. In some of the meetings a year or 2 ago, I was there and they talked about where it's going to wander and so on and what kind of riprap we would use. And the egress is now going to be on the west side of the opening in front of Zisters. So you would come in front of Zisters and go out in front of Zisters. Martinizing will evaporate, and it just boggles the mind that bikers and walkers would go out where more cars are coming and going and have to go along Watertown Plank Road to where conceivably there would be a new gazebo. Who is going to take their children to a gazebo that's about 15 feet from the railroad and the intersection? What possible good is that going to do? The money spent to get to that point. Legally, the original drawing that I have, one of the drawings that I have now on my desk, it's 56 feet wide. There's a 10-foot wide pathway. None of our pathways in the village are 10 feet wide. They're 5 and 6 feet wide. The change of the traffic will drastically change the downtown. Don't tell me you want walkability and more parking when we're going to take away dozens of parking spaces for an open creek that is dry 2 or 3 months out of the year. I'm opposed to the expansiveness of the opening.
Neil, what are your thoughts on the daylighting of Underwood Creek?
Well, I think it's a different characterization of what is the reality. The creek is, Underwood Creek from Watertown Plank Road to Wall Street is inside a tunnel, which was done illegally, not by the village and not by the current landowners. All over the state, creeks were what's called channelized to make land more developable. They're illegal. All across the state, the DNR for decades has been, whenever the opportunity arises, they force that to be opened up and have the creek put back in a natural state. Not necessarily meandering, but at least it has to be open to the environment and you have to improve it. When we went, after the 98 tragic floods, we went through a multi-year study that I was the village representative on, with all our communities for the whole sub-watershed, from Capitol Drive all the way down to where the Underwood Creek joins the Menominee River, near southern Tosa, if you're not familiar with that, and analyzed, created 18 different options. We ultimately picked the one we built, which cost the village more than anything we had ever done to create a stormwater management program that since it was built and opened, we have not had a flooded structure in the village of Elm Grove caused by overland flooding. The part of it, during the permitting, the state pointed out that we are required to open that piece of the creek up. We were able to negotiate with them, which was a long process, and ultimately reach what's called a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. It's a legal contract. I signed it for the village, where they agreed to not require us to open it as part of the flood control project so that we could get on with the flood control project. We committed that we would use our best efforts over time to get it daylighted and work with the landowners to have that happen and work with the state. We have been successful in the last 13 years of acquiring 3 different grants for what is in effect in excess of $500,000 total. I'm going to run over a little bit. The variations in size and so on that Mary alludes to are simply different designs that we have come up with. None of them, which she mentioned, I'm sorry, I'd like to help you with that, are the ones that are currently on the table. The plan is simply to take the creek as it after it passes under Watertown Plank Road, turn it immediately east, take it correctly to where the current 1-hour Martinizing building is, which by the way is for sale and is going to close anyway. And then it follows the railroad grade south until a point just south of Wall Street. In the actual engineering and design, and when you do the measurement of the actual design, there is not only not a loss of parking, there's probably enhanced parking. Because what a lot of people realize, that maybe Mary you missed, is that as you get south of the grocery store, the railroad track is fading east, and there's that open fallow land. Like for those of you who are used to going to the DPW to dump your leaves and so on, if you look to your left before you go to the gate, there's a great big large open piece of land there. That's abandoned railroad. We propose to buy that. The creek will be moved way over there. It's way east of what is the current pavement. In addition, once you move the creek from where it is now, even after it comes out of the tube right behind Sundex and runs past the 890 office building, the semicircular one, it will be moved away from that building, and all of that space, which is in excess of 90 feet, will become parking lot because the creek will now be way over there. So I don't think the issues raised about grandiosity or design are accurate. Most of the people during both the downtown master plan and the daylighting open houses are quite excited about it. We've got the ability to pay for it in a way that literally no homeowners will see an increase in cost, because our original TIF for the stormwater project is about to be finished, so we can just keep it alive for a little bit longer to pay that remaining dollars. On the impact of business question, every one of the business owners and property owners in the Park and Shop area, including the Sendex, the Corcuses who own the Park and Shop, all support the daylighting, publicly on record. And the final point I have to make is we don't have a choice. We are under a legal requirement. The situation it sits in right now is if the tunnel were to have any serious collapse or damage to it, and any of us who've been here a while will remember that at least twice in the 30 years plus I've lived here, the top of the tunnel has collapsed, so that literally somebody driving in that parking lot ended up with their wheels inside a tunnel. The DNR, the agreement, I'm happy to show it to you, forbids the repair. If it forbids any substantial repair, if the tunnel needs substantial repair, they're going to demand daylighting at that time. So you're going to wait till it collapses, you'll put everybody out of business, while in a completely unplanned manner, you'd have to try to solve this. That's a nightmare. You can't do that. And not to mention, we've got a legal requirement. We've worked at it very hard to do it in a reasonable way, which I personally believe, and most who've studied it hard, believe it'll become a significant bonus to the downtown to have an open, walkable creek near our shopping area. I guess I'd liken it to when we started the flood project in the park, a lot of people were very, very, very concerned. And now we're asked people what they think of the park compared to what it used to look like, with the walking trails and the naturalization. I believe it'll be a great benefit. Every community in the state that has a chance to open some water source in their city center tries to do it.
Great, thanks, Neil.
Sorry,
Mary, if you'd like to respond, I'd like to give you an extra minute, just because that answer went a little long.
We're on the clock, right?
Well,
I disagree with Neil on some of the points that he's made. I think if we have to open the creek, fine. But there's nothing that, having been in retail, a lot of the people on the board have never worked in retail or owned retail. It's different than some other types of service companies. It's different. Every time you tear up a road near or in front of a retail shop, they lose. We don't need a creek open that only runs through there periodically. The flooding has been taken care of. Opening the creek is different than opening the creek. We can go back to this. It still can conform with the DNR requests and demands, but I think it's too much. And putting parking behind Sendex and behind, my gallery was in the 890 building when we had the flood. People don't park back there, and they don't. They park in the front, facing Elm Grove Road. Let's be practical. What is intuitive? Neil used that term earlier tonight. It's not intuitive the way it's designed now, and it's going to really damage. And I would like to take a look at it again if I'm elected, because I think it's too grandiose and too expensive now and in the long run. Thank you.
thanks. I think we'll move on to closing statements. Mary, you can go first, and you can have up to 4 minutes for that.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you to the Junior Guild for hosting this. Very, very good idea. I think it was a really good idea. I would like to encourage our residents to vote. It's a small election. It's not the national election that we've had, but please vote. You can come to the Village Hall between now and the 6th and do in-person early voting, or come on the 6th, and the polls are open from 7 in the morning till 8 at night. I would appreciate you considering me for president for the village. I really would love to serve the village in that capacity. I think I have different experience in life than some of the people on the board, and I think I can bring a lot to the board through those different life experiences. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Neil, do you have a closing statement? Up to
Yes,
4
thank
minutes.
you. Thank you again, Sarah, and members of the Junior Guild for agreeing to host these forums. And thank you, Mary, for both being a candidate and being here tonight. I very much enjoy and feel I do a good job as village president, and I'm asking for your vote. I do think it's important that we get as many people to turn out as possible. I want a small correction to Mary. You cannot vote what's called in-person absentee up until election day. That's illegal.
No, early voting, I said.
No, you can't do that.
In person.
It ends Friday, not Tuesday. You can do the early voting up until the end of business day Friday.
Right. Oh, I thought
Then
we
that
were closed.
closes and you can vote in person on April 6th, Tuesday, here from 7 to 5.
Are we not closed on Friday? It's Good Friday.
Huh?
I thought I heard.
Well, but you said up until April 6th. My point is you can't do it on Friday. You can't do it on Monday. You
Okay.
cannot vote that way.
So check before you come.
Yeah. So the point is, yes, do vote. I do believe that I have both the knowledge and the experience to deal with the issues that are in front of the village, and I would like the opportunity to continue that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I did want to also ask you how residents can contact you if they would like to elaborate on any of the things that we've discussed tonight. Do you have a village?
There's an awful lot of residents who know how to contact me already, but all of my information on telephone and email are available on the website. I'm in the phone book. By the way, we have an awful lot of new residents who don't get their name and address in the annual Women's Club phone book. Please do that. It's a wonderful thing for a small community to have. But I'm completely available. I may not get back to you instantly, but I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And you can also write emails. I get a lot of emails. That's often a good way to do it because I can get back to you in the middle of the night or some other time when it's easier to be going through email.
Mary, how can voters contact you if they'd like to learn more?
My email is very simple, mary.inden@gmail.com. So you can email at any time. If you'd like to call, my number is 414-915-4830. Anytime, it's fine.
Great. I appreciate this. I appreciate how civil and respectful and just educational that this forum has been. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate you guys making the time to do it. I hope that the public has learned a lot as well. So on behalf of the Elm Grove Junior Guild and the president candidates, we thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Sarah.